Apple just announced the most powerful version of Siri it has ever built. It can hold real conversations, it pulls context from your emails, messages, and photos, it takes action across apps without being asked. This is the AI assistant Apple spent 2 years promising and is finally delivering. But there's one problem. The most powerful version of Siri will only run on a handful of iPhones, not because of software, not because of a better chip, but because of memory. Specifically, 12 gigabytes of RAM. In Apple's entire iPhone lineup, only 3 models meet that threshold: the iPhone 17 Pro, the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and the iPhone Air. That might look like a deliberate choice to push upgrades. It is not. It is a supply chain problem. The AI boom that Apple wants to ride has created a global memory shortage. The same chips Apple needs to put AI into its devices are being consumed by the data centers training the AI models Apple wants to use. Apple's biggest product and its biggest ambition are running into the same supply chain at the same time. This is a story about what happens when even the world's most valuable company cannot buy its way out of a problem it did not create. To understand how Apple ended up in this position, we need to look at two things. First, how Apple's product decision set a memory requirement most of its own iPhones cannot meet. And second, why AI servers and smartphones are suddenly fighting over the same global supply, and how that is now squeezing Apple. Let's unpack this. Start with the product decision, a choice that Apple made on purpose and ended up setting a hardware floor most iPhones cannot clear. For privacy reasons, Apple built its AI around on-device processing. The goal is simple. Siri can understand your personal context, your messages, emails, photos, screen, and app activity without Apple simply collecting all of that information in the cloud. That doesn't mean nothing ever leaves the phone. For more complex requests, Apple can still use its private cloud compute system, but the principle is clear. Keep as much intelligence as possible on the device and send only limited request-specific data to Apple's cloud when the phone itself is not enough. That's a real advantage. It's also where the hardware problem begins, because while a cloud assistant can rent its memory from a data center, Siri has to carry that memory in your pocket. And modern AI models are hungry. To run Apple's most capable on-device model, a phone needs at least 12 gigabytes of RAM. For years, the standard iPhone shipped with 8. So the moment Apple chose privacy, it also drew a straight line through its own customer base, between the phones with enough memory and the phones without. That's the first problem. Here's the second. Apple can push a software update to every iPhone user overnight. What it cannot update is the hardware inside those phones. The 8 gigabyte iPhone a customer bought last year will never run Apple's most powerful Siri, regardless of how many iOS updates follow. The only way to get the new AI into more hands is to sell more 12 gigabyte phones. And to do that, Apple has to buy more memory, at the worst moment to be buying memory. By the way, if you want to follow how the AI infrastructure build-out is quietly squeezing the consumer hardware market, that is exactly what we cover every week in our newsletter, ARPU. To get that kind of analysis in your inbox, subscribe at the link in the description. Now for the second part. This is where the story stops being about Apple and starts being about a supply shortage that is reshaping the entire industry. The world's memory supply comes from essentially 3 companies: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. They make 2 kinds of memory that matter to this story. Standard memory goes into phones and laptops. A more specialized, more expensive kind, called high bandwidth memory, or HBM, goes into Nvidia's AI accelerators in data centers. The crucial point is that both are produced on the same semiconductor equipment. When a factory is making HBM, it is not making phone memory. The two compete for the same production capacity. Over the past 2 years, AI has been winning that competition decisively. Micron has already sold out its entire 2026 allocation of AI server memory. When Nvidia and the hyperscalers arrive with multi-year contracts and premium prices, phone makers lose the bidding before it starts. IDC described the dynamic plainly. Every wafer allocated to an HBM stack for an Nvidia GPU is a wafer denied to the memory module of a smartphone. The result is a price shock already working through the supply chain. A JP Morgan analysis cited by the Financial Times projected that memory could account for as much as 45% of a flagship iPhone's bill of materials by 2027, up from roughly 10% today. The damage is showing up in Apple's numbers. The company guided its June quarter gross margin to between 47.5 and 48.5%, lower than March's 49.3%. Cook walked investors through the progression directly: minimal memory impact in December, higher in March, and significantly higher expected in June. When pressed on what Apple would do once the inventory buffer runs out, Cook was direct about the scale of the problem and careful not to commit to a solution.
And I can tell you that beyond the June quarter, we believe memory costs will drive an increasing impact on our business. And we'll continue to evaluate this, and as we've said before, we'll look at a range of options.
That is the language of a company that has not yet decided whether to raise prices, absorb the margin hit, or both. The effect is also visible across the broader market. Counterpoint Research projects global smartphone shipments will fall 13.9% in 2026, the lowest level since 2013, not because demand has collapsed, but because the cheapest phones are becoming too expensive to build. The same AI boom that gave Apple a reason to build a smarter Siri is the reason Apple cannot get that Siri into most people's hands. The data centers training tomorrow's AI are consuming the exact components Apple needs to ship today's products. And this is not a problem that clears up next quarter. Apple isn't waiting out a bad month. It's facing a structural shortage that could outlast the entire generation of the new Siri. So where does that leave us? Apple rebuilt Siri, then made the principled choice to run it on-device for privacy, and in doing so, handed its AI ambitions to a supply chain it doesn't fully control. It can afford every memory chip it needs, but the problem is that everyone else is buying them too. That is the lesson the AI boom keeps teaching. The bottleneck is always something physical. Nvidia found it in GPUs, Google found it inside its TPUs, and Apple just found it in the most ordinary component in the device. The smartest assistant Apple has ever built is now waiting on the one thing its balance sheet can't conjure: enough memory to go around. But as the entire tech sector collides with these physical limits, the next question is how other hardware and software giants will navigate the structural memory bottleneck. That is what we break down every week in our newsletter, ARPU. If you want this kind of analysis in your inbox, subscribe at the link in the description. Thanks for watching.